Hi, welcome or welcome back. Thank you for stopping by my channel. If you're new here, welcome. And if you are an OG, welcome back. So, every April, I like to set aside some time and reflect on the environment as a whole. Not just one area of the environment, but the environment in the world in its totality. And so, for Earth Day, which is celebrated on the 22nd of April. I like to take it a stretch forward. So I like to coincide, with this particular holiday because it gives me pause to think about all the environmental injustices we as human beings or humaning, as we're humaning, create and looking for a blueprint of understanding to be more mindful of our part in the world and how we can either create harmony with the earth or just pure destruction. Now, this is not just here where I live, which is these United States for now, but also globally. And so the books that I have, they are referring to my home. However, it does stretch across the globe and has a story to tell. So let's get into the story. The books I want to share for this rec either have personal stories, personal reflections, and a lot of it is underlining violence and social causes of environmental racism. So let's get into the first selection. The first book I would like to pull are books about personal experiences and the evolution of nature and how it is sought and how it is pursued. The first one is The Home Place, authored by J. Drew Liam. This man tells the story of his experience with nature and his outlook and his reflection on nature. As this is from a small publisher, I don't know if this is a link on any of the larger networks, but I would definitely leave the name in the title, the name and the author of the book if you're interested. So let's give a little bit of what the author or what it talks about. Um, Let me see. By turns angry, funny, elegant, heartbreaking, The Home Place is a remarkable meditation on nature and belongings. This is a once and deeply moving memoir and a riveting exploration and contradiction of black identity in the rural South and the American today. So this dates, well, it doesn't date back to slavery. This is a black man talking and expressing his relationships with the environment and what lessons he learned from his ancestors to the present day. I think this is worthy of putting it on your TBR or even looking into it. The next one is from John Francis, The Ragged Edge of Silence, Finding Place in a Noisy World. This is definitely a book of meditations on the environment. So what the author does, he gives, and this is highly digestible in small sound bites. So he gives you the story, and then he asks you to, what was the quote? I want to make sure that I got the quote right. Lessons in silence. So each lesson, either it is a journaling assignment, an assignment where the author is asking you to just sit and reflect. I encourage you, if you were to delve into this book, to have a notebook to write in, something to write with. And the lessons in silence, it gives you a scenario that it wants you to follow, and then you reflect on it. Now, for me, it helps me when I'm reflecting. Once I have my thoughts and my opinions about something, to write it down. So the author, John Francis, he is known for other nature's work. One of it is called The Peace Walker. Yes, The Peace Walker. And so heavily into, the world and nature and how it is part of our social tentacles, and we need the nature, and we need nature to perform at its highest in order for all of us on everything on earth to survive. The next one is about water. And so, present day, we are definitely falling for this concept that, if we purchase a certain water, it's definitely better. But that is a telling story to let us know that our waters are in a, how can I say, in a system of consumerism, and it's determining, who gets what, at what cost. Here in the United States, you can go case by case, city by city, and we know that poor, highly populated Black and brown communities are affected by toxic water because our government, who allow companies and corporations to dump toxins in there without any kind of regulations, you know, don't care because they understand. They just don't care for the long-term consequences of the people in these communities. They feel like they may not have a voice. We have cases globally all over. I mean, like, I'm not even gonna say globally. We have cases all over the United States regarding, the environment, particularly water. And with the gutting of the EPA currently, and there's still going to be a lot of programs and grant money and funding and research and everything just obliterated. I think it is important to know that as a citizen of America, we should not be paying for a natural resource such as water. But here we are. So this book right here, Written in the Water, Messages of Hope for Earth's and Precious Resources by Irene Salina, edited by Irene Salina, tells stories of various activists who talk and address about the importance of water and what it plays to the entire Earth's livelihood. I encourage you to definitely look into this one, especially if you're buying, these culture brands like Dasani or, any other water brand. It's like, why are we paying for water? Like, why? Why are we as citizens, paying for water? That's just another tax on our life, you guys. The next one, and also an issue of the EPA, as this government is constantly trying to sell away and negotiate land that has been preserved by legislation, over 300 million acres of our forests here in the United States. For these reasons, is that if we cut all the forest trees down, where would the animals go? If we build on top of everything. And so these are people, who have the money to move and move their families and loved ones across, the earth. But for those of us who want to stay where we at, or, we are part of this land and part of the growing environment, we want to be mindful of, how are we addressing ourselves, our family, our community. It's a global effort to make sure that we are speaking out about, environmental protections. And that is just one thing that we never address when we're talking about, government in the office. It's, the impact they have on allowing companies to just run rampant at our consent. So this book, Finding the Mother Tree, Discovering the Wisdom of the Forest, Suzanne Simard. This book talks about the importance of the forest and our relationships with trees. Is also is parallel, and this takes a deeper dive into that. And the author, she addresses the importance of, as humans, in humaning once again, that we be mindful of the environment around us and what part does this entity plays on our livelihood. The next one is Eating to Extinction, the World's Rarest Foods and Why We Need to Save Them. Dan Saladino. This one is a new read for me, and I hope to get into it soon. But the author, he basically talks about the extinction of various foods that some of them we are aware of, but there are a lot of them that I wasn't even aware of that are close to extinction. And so we're talking about like basic stuff like fruits and vegetables, right? And so because everything, a lot of things has been hybridized once again, we're labeling everything, to determine, like our levels of health. Well, I will buy organic this, but I'm not going to buy organic that. When in fact that we have corporations like Monsanto's who is, pouring toxins all over our lands. We shouldn't have to look at, barcodes and say, okay, this is organic or this is a hybrid. It's, yeah. So this author, he definitely delves deep into those subjects. The next one is Saving Alaska Wilderness Kingdom, 1879 to 1960. And this has a little bit of the story of how Roosevelt and his administration put aside almost over 200 million, or was it 300 million acres, a little bit over, to preserve the land. And this is the fight for Alaska. Now, I'm going to say this was not a famous topic before, the EPA was even established, but you did have people who understood the relationship between humans and the earth, right? So, yeah, this is a great read, and it goes into, the environment in Alaska and how its environment, Alaska environment impacts the rest of the world. Yeah. Good read, good read. Now, I'm going to shift it a little because these are not topics that we may not see as like a environmental threat, but I do like to keep in mind that when I talk about environmental injustice, I'm talking about not only the things that we do not legally have ownership to, like water and trees and stuff like that. Because that's a part of the earth, right? However, I want to delve into the human aspect of environmental injustice. And so I'm going to start off with this book, A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind by Harriet Washington, as she talks about the practices that are garnered in our medical community and throughout these United States, right? How the black body is not protected, is always subjected. And yeah, she really delves in deep into this, the aspect of the environment and what role as citizens, how we can change the trajectory, or at least have the understanding to change to change the outcome. You can't say trajectory twice. Trajectory. I did it. But anyway, so yeah, understanding the outcomes of what the environment plays and the tolls it plays on black and brown lives. Another topic that we really don't address is how the government attempted, and it was a well researched initiative, the Kerner Report, as it points out to the injustice, the disparities of black people, whether it was housing, whether it was, the overall their living environment, whether it was education, whether it was, just basic every livelihood or facet of the American life. And so from this Kerner Report, it definitely shined a light on the, like I said, the disparities and the injustice that black people and brown people have had to deal with since, for a long time. I'm going to take it back to the Indians, but this book don't. So, Separate and Unequal, the Kerner Commission and the Unraveling of American Liberalism, Steve M. Gullin. And it definitely talks about the findings of the Kerner Report and how our government have not followed through. And that is an injustice. And injustice to one, as it pertains to their environment, their health, and their livelihood, is an injustice to all. And sometimes we don't see it like that, especially if you are not in a situation where you have to really think about it. That is, but it takes a person of intelligence and compassion and apathy and empathy to reflect on those. So I'm not as anticipating on people who don't understand to even delve into these type of subjects, because sometimes we stay so much in our orbit that everything that's going on, it doesn't matter. An example would be George Floyd. I remember the day where I saw the film where this police had his knee on this man's neck out in public, right? Because KKK has taken off their robes. They've been taking off their robes. They're just in suits. They're in our government. They are sometimes our neighbors. They are sometimes our employers. They are sometimes people who we call friends. And so it takes a twist in how we look at life as a whole as we grapple with this topic of injustice, as we grapple with this topic of the environment, as we grapple with this topic of of us coming together and being as one. I'm not saying that we have to be friends with everyone, but we do owe each other the mutual respect as humans and humaning, that will bring proper wellness to everybody. And so as I look at those subjects and those topics, not only George Floyd, but George Floyd, he was, I want to say he had an addiction. An addiction should not be a crime. He had a drug addiction. And that should not be a crime. That should never be a crime. And although I'm not recommending his book, I want you to really pay attention to that example of how society treats, how can we say, wellness, environmental wellness, social wellness as something that should be garnered or preserved for whiteness. And so as I get into my last recommendation, well, not close to my last recommendation, this book, When Crack Was King, The People of a Misunderstood Era by Donovan X. Ramsey. He goes into several families. He goes into several families' background as they grapple with the addiction of crack cocaine and everything that was infiltrated in black communities through our government. And so he goes into these individual stories, talk about their outcomes. This is one for the ages. I encourage anyone who wants to know about this era of crack cocaine, I encourage you to read this book. Now, we're going to get into one book that it has a lot to do with the American story, but it also has a lot to do with how do we look at the environment as it juxtaposed to how other places in the world that we have business with, how what affects them affects us. In No Immediate Danger, this is a series that I'm actually currently reading. This is the volume 1 of volume 2. No Immediate Danger, the volume 1, I'm sorry, of the Carbonology Ideologies. I probably said that twice. But this, the origin story is the story of individuals in Japan. So Hima, I want to get the location right. Fukushima, Japan, industrial part of Japan, the country, as it grapples with the industrial age and how this small town now decimated, and to the point to where the livelihood is not bearing, and how they deals with it and how it's still evolving. Sometimes I'm having a challenge I'm very challenged by the story because it appears that this small town has been affected by radiation. Sometimes I feel like the author is giving it pause or giving it justification for it, but I can't tell you because I'm not done with it. But um, I am in the middle of reading this, and anyone who has any question of how what we do here in these United States affect us globally, No Immediate Danger is definitely one book that I encourage you to pick up. Last but not least, we're going to end on a probably a more softer, well, not softer, let me stop. What a Crawdaads Sing, Dahlia Owens, about a young lady who finds a body in this part of the in the marsh. And so I always say this is the Marsh Girl. But let me read it for you. For years, rumors of the Marsh Girl have haunted Brinkley Cove, a quiet town on the North Carolina coast. So in the late 1969, when handsome Chase Andrews is found dead, the locals immediately suspect Kaya Clark, the so-called Marsh Girl. But Kaya is not what they say. Sensitive and intelligent, has survived for years alone in the marsh that she calls home, finding friends in the gulls and the lessons in the sand. Then the time comes when she yearns to be touched and loved. When the young men from the town, intrigued by her wild beauty, Kaya opens herself to a new life until unthinkable happens. So I saw the movie When a Crawdad Sing. I was highly emotional. It is, I love the movie. So I have not read the book. However, this is definitely one that will have you think about our role in the environment and what we call home. And so, yeah, what a Crawdad Sing is where I'm going to end this rec list off. So, if you have any questions or if you like any of my suggestions or if you read any of them, let me know. And what did you think about them? Let's continue this conversation in the comments below. Oh, and by the way, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe and come back for more recs, more book chats, and everything bookish. Until next time, fam, have a beautiful day wherever you are in the world.